Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is September 1st. On this day in 1981, in a quiet Indiana living room, 15-year-old Eric Witte pulled the trigger on a gun aimed at his father, Paul. At first, it looked like a tragic accident. It was an awful mistake made by a boy who was too young to understand what he was holding. But as the years went on, that one gunshot turned into one of Indiana's strangest murder cases. Today, we're talking about a saga that would eventually reveal a mother's manipulations, a grandmother's horrific end, and two sons who never had the chance to escape the grip of the woman who raised them. Let's get started. On the night of September 1st, 1981, Paul Witte was asleep on the living room sofa of his family's home in northern Indiana. Paul was 43 years old. He was a volunteer firefighter, a father of two boys, and by all accounts, a man who was just trying to hold his family together. But his teenage son Eric was holding a .357 Magnum revolver and standing just a few feet away. When the shot rang out, it struck Paul in the head. He died instantly. In the immediate aftermath, Eric insisted that it was all a mistake. He told investigators that he had found the gun in the house, that he picked it up out of curiosity, and that as he approached his father, who was still asleep on the couch, he tripped on a rug. The gun, he said, had just gone off. Detectives, though, weren't entirely convinced. The angle of the shot didn't seem to match Eric's story. But when they tried to question him further, his mother, Marie, quickly stepped in. She insisted on having a lawyer present before her son said another word. So with his mother and his attorney sitting beside him, Eric repeated his story. He tripped, the gun had fired, and the whole thing was a terrible accident. Marie herself refused to give a formal statement. She claimed that she hadn't been home when the shooting happened. And with no evidence to prove otherwise, investigators ruled that Paul's death was accidental. It was written off as a tragic mishap, but in reality, it was only the beginning. After Paul's death, Marie received a small insurance payout, and she moved with Eric and his younger brother John, nicknamed Butch, into the home of Paul's widowed stepmother, Elaine Witte, in Trail Creek, Indiana. It was supposed to be a fresh start for a family that was still reeling from a tragedy. But Marie didn't see it that way. She saw opportunity. Court records later revealed that she began forging Elaine's Social Security checks and pocketing the money for herself. And then Marie began talking with her youngest son, Butch, about ways to kill Elaine. She floated ideas. Maybe they should poison her tea, or push her down the stairs, or strangle her. It wasn't the first time that Marie had turned to poison. It would later be revealed that years earlier, she had laced Paul's food with rat poison and Valium, hoping to kill him slowly before she finally got impatient and ordered Eric to shoot him instead. By January 1984, Paul was dead, Eric had graduated high school and joined the Navy, and Marie's attention had fully shifted to Elaine. She woke her son Butch, just 14 years old, and told him it was time. Butch later testified that his mother gave him options. He could strangle Elaine, or he could use his crossbow. He chose the crossbow. When the arrow struck Elaine in the rib cage, she collapsed. And with that, John had killed his grandmother at his mother's command. What happened next was almost unthinkable. Marie didn't call for help, obviously. Instead, she and Butch worked together to dismember Elaine's body. Over several weeks, they used knives, a chainsaw, and even a garbage disposal to break her remains down. They bagged what was left and stored it in a freezer. Later, they scattered her remains across Indiana, Illinois, and California. For a while, Marie's web of lies held. Elaine's disappearance was explained away, and Paul's death was still considered to have been an accident. But in late 1984, Marie was arrested in California for forging Elaine's Social Security checks. That arrest cracked everything open. Detectives pressed the family for answers, and the youngest, Butch, finally broke. He admitted that he had shot Elaine with his crossbow after his mother told him to. Detectives were stunned not only by the crime, but by the casualness of Marie's instructions. And once Butch confessed, the truth about Paul's death followed. Eric was questioned and eventually admitted that he hadn't slipped on a rug at all. He too had acted under his mother's relentless pressure. For months, she had poisoned Paul and told Eric he had to finish the job. On that night in 1981, Marie had conveniently left the house, leaving Eric alone with the gun and his sleeping father. He felt cornered, so he pulled the trigger. With the boys' confessions, police finally had the full picture. Once prosecutors reopened the case, Paul's so-called accident was reclassified as murder, and charges were swiftly filed. Marie was indicted for both Paul and Elaine's killings. For Paul's death, she faced charges of murder and attempted murder because of her earlier poisoning plots. For Elaine's, she was charged with murder and conspiracy. As for the boys, prosecutors acknowledged that both were children when they killed and that they had been manipulated into doing it. Eric, who shot his father at the age of 15, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and served 5 years. John, who shot his grandmother at 14, also pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. He received a 20-year sentence, though his cooperation in testifying against Marie weighed in his favor. Marie, meanwhile, faced the full weight of the law. She was convicted of both murders and sentenced to 90 years in prison, 60 years for Elaine's killing, plus 30 for conspiracy, stacked on top of her convictions for Paul's death. The jury's message was clear. Marie was the architect, and her manipulation had destroyed her family. By the mid-1990s, the legal battles were over, and the Witte family was all either dead or in prison. Eric, the boy who killed his father under Marie's orders, was released in 1996. He tried to live quietly, far away from the headlines that had once branded him a killer kid. He died in 2022 at the age of 56. John, who killed his grandmother at 14, also walked free in 1996, but his adult life was short. He died in 2008 at just 39 years old. Marie remains behind bars at the Indiana Women's Prison, where she has now spent nearly 4 decades. She's remembered now as the woman who manipulated her sons into murder. The Witte murders began with what looked like an accident, a boy tripping over a rug. But behind that story was a mother pulling strings and normalizing violence until her children did the unthinkable. It's a reminder that not all tragedies come from strangers in the dark. Sometimes the most dangerous person is already inside the home. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!